Hello and welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have a special guest. We have Steph Grubbs. She's back.
Hey, we're back, part two. I can't believe you're having me back on. I'm grateful.
To be fair, I loved our last conversation, and like I've mentioned to you just now, I felt like truthfully speaking, I wasn't prepared for some of the guests that I had on early on. Like, I didn't think I had enough reps, but we're good now, so I think this should be a better podcast.
We all could use more reps. Definitely myself as well. So yeah, let's make part two that much better.
Love it. Again, part two is solely happening as well because I watched the presentation of yours. And like the way you explained things was like, it was such a clear path to microdosing and the work that you're doing with, again, at Pitt at the time, but now the Astros. Like, with their schedules, this is the only way that makes sense for like this type of environment. But like you laid it out so easy that it was like, this is what she meant. So before I steal all your thunder, if you explain a little bit about like who you are and how you got to strength and conditioning.
Yeah, Stephanie Grubbs. Once Stephanie Mock, I decided to marry another strength coach, Ryan Grubbs, so he's not too shabby. Very competitive household, but I've been coaching for over 10 years now, which ages me a good bit, but I've been in college sector for 10 years. I've worked in professional sports, been exposed with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the NFL, and now MLB as well. So really enjoyed my time in like the ACC and the SEC conferences in college, and now, yeah, kind of seeing two breadths of work. And that's kind of, to your point, Manny, that went into my presentation. When I was at the IUSCAs, I wanted to talk about just some different systems and processes I've put together just working with so many different sports. And it sounds like I was successful in regards of creating systems that could kind of connect with everybody's quote unquote game model and set up with where they're at. So thank you for the shout out. I'm excited to talk more in depth and you ask some questions.
It's all good. And again, when I messaged you during that presentation, like I said, like everyone was pen to paper, and you kind of laughed, but like I'm being serious, like everyone was taking notes, and it was just like, again, it was so clear the way you laid it out that people were like, this makes sense. And I'm guessing like they then took it into their own practice and were like, okay, this is how it would fit in. So it was dope to watch. What is currently getting you fired up in the industry?
What gets me fired up, you said?
Yeah. This is a quick shout out to our main sponsor on this channel, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is all-in-one platform that hosts programs, questionnaires, testing, anything that you may need for your athlete's performance, you can host it in TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr also now has two different sides, which is OS and Practice. For more information on TeamBuildr, check out the link in the description. And if you use code PAChalkup all together, you will get a 30-day free trial.
Man, I think what gets me fired up is just throughout my time working in strength and conditioning, just the forward momentum that we're building a field. I think sometimes like a lot of us are like, man, we can still do better. We can still achieve higher salaries. We can still achieve more positions at different levels, and whether it's high school or whatever it may be. But I think it's been really cool for me personally to see high performance redefined. So just seeing like when I started, even as a college athlete, when I got into at that time, football strength coaches had the Olympic sports. And that's when I met my first mentor, Corey Twine. To see like then to now, you see a lot of teams like there's volleyball only strength coaches, there's baseball only strength coaches, along with the basketballs and football. So I think it gets me fired up to see how far our fields come. I'm not saying we always have more room to grow and push the envelope, but just the buy-in that we're getting with sport coaches and working within the performance team and really bringing a lot of value to the table. And sometimes I like to think of strength and conditioning as like physical preparation coaches, because we're physically preparing them for the sport, for the KPIs that come with their sport and what they need. And I think that's where I saw microdosing strength training in season. I was just trying to find the best way to physically prepare, whether it was my female athletes or my male athletes, for daily practice or for baseball. Like we're playing every day, so every day is game day. So how am I able to physically prepare them for a game day in?
Yeah, I like what you said there with taking a different name to what we do and as a performance coach? Because like strength and conditioning, it's kind of been bastardized at this point. Like anyone and everyone can be a strength coach, especially in the UK. It's a wild industry across here. But it is like, it's looking at no matter which level you are and pushing them to that high performance. And you kind of touched on this, but I kind of want to break it down a little bit more. When you said high performance is kind of being redefined, what do you mean and what have you seen?
Yeah, I would say high performance being redefined. I think when specifically strength and conditioning started, we were seen as just like the sets and reps guys or gals in the field, and kind of the hammers always dropping the standard and kind of meathead type mentality. And now I think high performance has been redefined in regards of as strength coaches or sports scientists, let's say, being kind of married, and that's where the physical preparation coaches come into play. We're having a heavier role in practice planning every day, whether it's using like GPS and things like that. We're having a seat at the table at some of these meetings when it comes to looking at talent identification. So I think we're just casting a wider net and bringing even more value to the table in regards to like what our role entails. And just if you think about the performance staffs of like the sole number of positions we had 10 years ago versus however many, and I like to think of high performance as including like PTs, dietitians, athletic trainers, strength coaches, performance scientists, just how much the actual performance team, high performance team has grown. And I think we've redefined, whether it's adding numbers and adding positions, but also just our influence that we may have with the head coach or the manager or front office or administration when it comes to investing in the weight room and equipment. So I think we're like just getting started, and now it's like kind of good to create that flywheel concept of like we're just getting the flywheel started, and then it's going to continue to perpetuate over and over and over again as long as we bring in the...
That's a great example with the flywheel, because it's like that inertia when you put so much effort into things and you're wanting to that unwind and just build up on it. That's a great example.
No, good to great. That's where I got it from. It is not a Stephanie Grubbs-ism. It's just the bajillion books that I like to dive into.
Which is actually something that after our conversation, I was like, fuck, I need to read more.
Just getting a little bit better each day. That's all. Atomic Habits, 1%. Stacks
100%. So when you are trying to redefine your performance and how that's implemented, obviously you've spoken a lot about microdosing and taking these little incremental 1% increases into your performance. Now, you've obviously been in sports where you're playing multiple days a week, and I know you've had different schedules, which is something that I want to get into. How do you start sort of figuring out where your microdosing can come into play depending on your schedule?
Yeah, and I think that's where you start out, and us as S&C practitioners, we always look at the end in mind. So hopefully we're going to win a World Series, a national championship, whatever that may look like. So I'm like, all right, this is the last week of season and I'm going to work backwards. So let me figure out from a context standpoint, how many weeks of training am I going to have? How much time is the sport coach going to let me have? What are my facilities home and away? What does that look like? Am I going to have the same weight room equipment at home and on the road, or am I going to be super limited on the road? Like I was just meeting up with a good friend that works in the NWSL, and she was just like, hey, sometimes when we're on the road, we can have a lot or we can have a little, so just creativity is going to be king in that regard. So I think looking at some of this context and putting together a list and asking yourself all these questions, and then just working with the sport coach, like, have they ever been exposed to microdosing strength training in season? If they haven't, like, you're going to want to try to find small wins from the get-go. Or, like when I was meeting with that strength coach from the NWSL, we were talking about like maybe in football or soccer, they call it activation. So maybe you just lengthen out your activation. For us, maybe it's just called like prep before they go hit or play catch or whatever it may be. So maybe you're just elongating that prep time by adding in a few movements, or you're lengthening your activation time and just adding some loaded movements into that activation portion. So sometimes if it's new to a team, how you introduce it's going to be really important. And I think just adding in small bits along the way is going to help you see success. But I think you just need to first kind of ask yourself that list of questions that I just kind of rambled off, just to see where it can fit in, and are you going to be successful? I've been lucky that from a weight room standpoint, especially in baseball, we always have like a certain list of equipment on the road and at home. But like when I worked with pit volleyball, I was bringing equipment on the road, or I was asking certain schools, like, can I get in the weight room? And maybe the weight room's far away from the court for practice, and maybe I'm just bringing equipment and putting it on the court and doing it on the side. So I think with microdosing strength training, like creativity is going to be like super important. And us as practitioners, we're really good problem solvers. Like maybe a sport coach gives you a problem that they're running into. We're not fit enough. We're not strong enough. We're having a lot of injuries. And it's our job to try to help find solutions in our positions.
Yeah. And again, from these based questions, you then work out how each session is going to look like. With people having... So sports can come in different ways. So majority of sports, like your European sports, that'll be one time a week. Is microdosing still appropriate for one game a week? Or is that more for when you implement like 3 games a week or 2 games a week or even 5 games a week?
Yeah, and this was a big portion, like Manny, you said, my presentation of kind of the system that I've seen or put in place with different models. So there's a system for 1 game a week, so we can touch on that one being, I kind of call that the traditional microdose combo. So the furthest day out from game day, that's when it would be like day 1, and I would traditionally do like a traditional strength day. So maybe that's still your longer 45 to an hour a minute lifts with your team. And then as we get closer and closer to game day, day 2 would be more of a microdosing day. So I'd kind of split that 150 strength and power. Day 3, as we get closer, maybe more power and mobility, 50-50. Day 4, more mobility and movement, because that's going to be the closest microdosing strength training day to game day. But I think that's usually from a traditional microdosing combo. It's the nicest because you have so many days to train. You have so many days in between the games. You have 1 game per week. Say, like for me, for this example, I use Sunday, full week in between competition, and having that traditional strength day for this day out. You could do that one clearly post-practice, and then all the other days, day 2, day 3, day 4, you can do that prior to or post. There's some flexibility with that.
Yeah. You've kind of touched on something that many people that read textbooks will start to skin crawl, and it's mixing or comboing strength and power together. Now, can you break down why you've done that and how that actually looks like in a program?
Yeah, so just kind of elaborating on what I just talked about. And yeah, I think it's interesting depending on the population that I'm like presenting to. I sometimes change, depending on the audience, how I kind of set up my slides and explain things. So that's one thing that I learned from Brett Bartholomew. I did like his speaker school course, and he lays out like it's fantastic one, but I knew I needed to become a better speaker, so I was like, all right, I'm doing this a lot, let's invest some time and talk with Brett. But yeah, audience is always going to be one of the big things when you're putting your slides together. But usually that day 1, like the furthest day out from game day, I would see like that would be like a non-practice type day. So it was specifically just in the weight room working with me. Or it's like you do some top-up work if you're not playing, just to make sure you're staying ready in case you go in. That's usually for me a big lower body strength day, squat, heavy push chain type work. Maybe it's an RDL variation and some like accessory work, and then some heavy isos. Day 2, which is kind of what you're talking about, pre-practice game day minus, let's say 3. I usually do lower body power type work, so that's going to be more of like a trap bar pull or like a Kaiser power squat. And then I'll do bench press heavy in like a heavy row. So it's a lower upper split. So maybe that helps add more context to like the strength plus power combo in nature. And then day 3, game day minus 2, depending on, and this is where looking at your athlete population. For me, maybe certain guys are doing like a lighter primer type day, and they're doing like a box jump, a band assisted jump, med ball throws, and then some hypertrophy for like arms and shoulders, depending on what population you're working with. And then maybe you're doing some type of like FRC, range of motion type work. And then that day 4, you can do, like I'd said before or after, this is to me the closest training to game day. And really that's like more of a flow day. I like to call it motion is lotion. Maybe you're doing some body tempering or some soft tissue type work on that day. And playing time, of course, will kind of factor into this, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of the meat and potatoes for that one game a week.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And I think what's also understated is like you're talking about like lower upper, and like that is something that we can do as coaches to make sure that they're still getting the same stimulus, but maybe just different types of recovery for different types of movement. Like lower body will technically recover a little bit slower than upper body, depending on like the stimulus you give them anyways. So when they are coming into play, like those things count. Like you probably don't want to have them run across the pitch when they're have just completed a massive leg day, all sore, all tight. So like you want them to still be fresh. So I think it's again checking your whole surroundings to make sure if that's appropriate thing. And another question I kind of had was like with you having this sort of system where they're kind of exposed to different stimulus throughout the week, a microdosing level. How do you then individualize it for their specific movements or specific positions? Because not everyone in a baseball or volleyball team has the same requirements.
Definitely, and I think that of course was just one model. I could pivot to more of like for volleyball, the model that I worked with them, it was actually like a true quote unquote microdosing model because we had 2 games a week. It was usually like a Friday, Sunday model. And that was small exposures across the week. There was no traditional strength training day. It was small exposure across the week. Day 1 training day was just like a strength day. So it was always like right before practice, maybe 20, 25, 30 minutes at most if it was like a new week or a new training cycle. There's a lot of teaching involved. So day 1 was a strength day. Day 2 would kind of float into more of a power day. Day 3 a speed day. And then day 4 would fall in between game days of more of like a CNS primer type day. But these were all done, like Ed said, pre-practice. That strength day would be more high force. We do like a clean variation in squat and maybe some Nordics for post chain on that day. Wednesday being power would be more of like concentric work, so like a trap bar deadlift and some of our unilateral type work. Thursday being the speed day, we do a lot of like the loaded jumps, med ball throws and slams. Friday game. Saturday would be that primer CNS recharge, so like some really fast like mid thigh or hang cleans, maybe some box jumps, accelerated jumps, just trying to get that pop back instilled in the athlete. And then Sunday game. So, I mean, the beauty of kind of where my thought process came with this presentation was I wanted to give, like, every time you go meet with a head sport coach, you're usually like going to have option like plan A, plan B, plan C, because coaches like options. They like to kind of see what's out there. And then for some reason, if you only take one option and they're like, oh, this is not going to work. Like maybe that first one where you have the traditional strength training day, they're like, yeah, I don't want my guys or gals' legs to be sore for practice the following day. So that's not going to work. So maybe you do pivot to always lifting before practice, for that 15, 20, 30 minutes. More options, the better, the more adaptable you are, the higher level practitioner you're going to be in regards. So I always think about like the best ability is adaptability or availability. I said that on the last podcast that we did, but it's so important in our setting, because I think about just all the things we have to factor in, especially in my current job, whether it's travel, whether it's like if you're on turf or grass, are you traveling time zones, all of the above. So I think just, being adaptable in nature and going to your coach with options, just like I always try to think, what would I like if someone's coming into my office? I would probably want to see a couple different options laid out, and then you make the best decision as like a high performance team for what's going to work.
Yeah, and I think that's important as well, because ultimately the sports coach is the one that's going to have the last say in this. You've also you have obviously taken us through like the one game a week and how that would be like traditionally laid out. Now you're in an atmosphere, an environment where you are having to play, we'll probably say 50 games a day.
Yeah, that's how it feels sometimes. But,
How does that then compare to your model where you do have a little bit more scheduling freedom compared to now where you are on the road, you are playing these different games throughout the week? And again, you've just mentioned adaptability, but how important does that become depending on the factors that you have mentioned? That is the questions you need to ask yourself.
Yeah, and I would say, like, until I started working in Major League Baseball, I didn't understand just how many games we actually have in a season. So just like some quick spark notes for our seasonal calendar, if you haven't worked or been around Major League Baseball. During spring training, we have 30 games just within spring training. So teams kind of go to Arizona or Florida, whatever it may be. That makes up like 11% of our schedule. And then regular season's a beast. We have 162 games in 182 days. So just kind of think about how that may look with the All-Star break kind of being in the middle. And we have, let's say, 4 or 5 days off for that. And then postseason, you can have at most 22 games if you win, ideally, the World Series. So I think that could be like around like 200 plus games within one baseball season, which is crazy. So yeah, that's kind of...
Can we take a second and just think about, like, there's only 365 days in a year, and you're playing like 200 odd games?
Yes, it's a beast. So this is kind of part 3 of my frameworks for microdosing presentation. I called it fluid microdosing, but I think I could come up with a better name for it. So stay tuned. I'm going to work on that. But for us, we usually have 6 to 7 games a week. So just kind of, that's going beyond just what I talked about in depth, but 6 to 7 games a week, and I usually do a split of 2 upper body type days and then 2 lower body type days. So usually one upper day is more of a strength day, one upper day is more of a dynamic day, and same with lower strength and dynamic. And then we also try to add in, I keep like that motion is lotion type day in there as well. Maybe if it's like after some really tough travel, a lot of time zones, that we're coming off playing on turf for 3 days. So usually there's like 5 options within their lift sheet when they look at it. And a lot of these, like, the one thing with baseball is it's extremely unpredictable. So you could get on base as a position player and rack up 100 plus yards of high speed running, or I go 0 for 4 and I don't get on base at all and I can get like 5 yards of high speed running. It's not like you can control, like I have a constraints led approach or have control over, like when we're for soccer, it's like, okay, they played 45 minutes yesterday, and maybe you have like red, yellow, green, whatever else. Like for us, that's why it has to be so fluid in nature. And we kind of set it up as more of like a menu type of week. So however you're feeling after travel or being at home or being on the road, we work together from that menu to make the best decision for how you're feeling that day. And of course, we'll use different testing equipment to look at readiness and things like that. But that's how really we kind of set it up from like a menu standpoint. We look at travel stress, and then just road weight rooms sometimes aren't as fantastic as our home weight room, but it's still better than what I've seen in other sports for sure.
Yeah. You've touched on something interesting, and again, baseball isn't associated with their high-speed run. Well, high-speed running, yes, but like not longer distances. How do you plan for giving them the baseline to perhaps run 150 yards, and obviously some of the minors? I think, is it 5 meters per base?
Yeah, so usually for us we use, I know like catapult / like the big leagues, we use Hawkeye. So it's in every single stadium, so we can collect that information. So we have historical information as they're working up the system, like within whatever team you may be in MLB. And positionally, maybe outfielders get a little bit more runs. The infielders are kind of taking on that like sharp change of direction type work and staying in that squatting position for like the whole entire game. The outfielders, they may have to open up and spread more distance and cover a little bit more ground. So positionally, that's kind of like the basics, the foundation. But if a player, like, because we have traditional like everyday type guys that you're going to be playing almost, like you're probably going to play 150 plus games at the 162. And then we have some of the guys that are those like fringe players bouncing like down to AAA and up to us throughout the season. But we try to look at just making sure they're hitting for their personal like average and positionally, making sure they're getting high speed running every 3 to 4 days. They're getting that exposure. So they're not going like if they're not somebody that's starting for us every day, just making sure we're doing that top-up work. It's flying 10s, build-ups at the field. We may use like a leads react unit because we can't use catapult out on the field. So we just bring that little box, kind of set it up and have them run there, and then we can get feet or meters per second, whatever you're kind of measuring. But yeah, just have to get creative.
Nice. I think it's like with speed, there's like the simple way and there's a complex way. And I think for baseball, because it's not a sport associated with like the back and forward running, like obviously there is. If you watch a game, you can see it. And, like you've got curves. Like it's like planning for that may look different because they are somewhat linear, like curved linear, if that makes sense.
Definitely. No,
Yes.
we throughout spring training, we do a lot of like clearly base running progressions, but we're in season a lot of the time. So spring training is really our only time to kind of like build guys up and get them ready to go. And then off season is such like kind of a short period of time compared to other sports. It makes up like 28-29% of the year just with us playing so many games. And usually they're kind of going somewhere else to train. So that just kind of goes back into like the adaptability piece of trying to work with them throughout the off season to make sure they're like getting what they need.
That is a good point. So like you've spoke about the microdosing during in season. How does that building preparation phase look like compared to what we see in season?
Yeah, in the off season, clearly in professional sports, it's a little bit different because guys have multiple homes and they have their own guy or gal if they're going to a different state to train. But historically, when I worked in college sports, I would kind of take the time to build that foundation in the off season. So maybe you have, like for volleyball, we had the whole spring and summer, but summer leading into the in-season period, I usually had, let's say, like 6 to 8 weeks to kind of build those athletes up. So I really wanted to build that strong foundation. So I take them through like 2 weeks of eccentric, 2 weeks of isos, 2 weeks of concentric, and then that would kind of lead us into power-based work, and that would lead us into like preseason or training camp. So I would do like more traditional strength training throughout that prep phase leading into, and it was really like that summertime period leading into when we'd start season or training camp, and then that's when we would kind of let it rip. And we hope that those training residuals from that period of time in the summer would be able to let them hold on to what they needed. And then it seemed to work out really well from just like the force plate testing that we did and collecting some of those metrics from a catapult standpoint, and then just the basic vertec testing. It seemed to really allow them to hold and keep us going in a positive direction.
How hard does your job become with obviously off season? People will be dipping in and out. How does that sort of look like for you and planning your sessions around people who may be there and may not be there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not mandatory for these guys to be here. So all you can do in professional sports is be a resource for the guys. And whether you, like, I know I've heard about like in the NBA or even for us, like maybe you're going to where they're training in whatever state and you're visiting and building a relationship where they're at. Because like, I mean, these guys are pros. They're making a ton of money, especially in baseball, and I'm sure other sports. I can only speak to what I work in. The guys that take care of their bodies and do what they need in the off season, usually they're going to last a long time within the league, 2 or 3 years, and then they don't last and they lose talent and whatever it may be. So these guys are professional athletes. They need to have a routine that's going to work for them, and we're there to kind of guide them along and be a resource. At the end of the day, you're almost just like, I don't want to say a consultant, but you're there when they have a problem, ask a question like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And that's why during the season, it's so important to be a good communicator, build relationships with the guys, like just be there for them, whatever they need throughout that period of time. But I mean, yeah, in professional sports, like even with the Steelers, like in the off season, a lot of guys didn't want to live in Pittsburgh all year round. Like it's snowing, it's cold, it's terrible. So they'd go live somewhere else where they could like throw a football and run outside. And so I can't blame them for not wanting to live. Or here, it's extremely hot. So like maybe you want to go to Arizona, California. So we have spring training in West Palm Beach. So maybe there's a lot of guys that just live down in that area so they can stay at their home and live there throughout spring training. So it's like 45 days. So yeah, that's where I think the creativity piece of how can you stay in touch with the guys, or when they come in town, like really take advantage of that time, catch up with them, and continue to be a resource and bring value.
Yeah, I suppose like that'll build a lot of the trust that they'll have. Like obviously you'll know that they'll be working with someone else, but like they'll be able to touch point with you, like this is what I've done during this period of time.
Yeah, I think that's where it can be valuable to build relationships with, like, if I know someone's going to train, let's say like at Exos in Arizona, because they live in Arizona, why not build strong relationships with all these different private training facilities where guys have like, they actually live in the off season. Don't be like, oh, I can't believe they're like going to train with so-and-so. It's like, no, outreach, learn from them, build good communication lines. Like, we just want what's best for the guy. So like, what can I do to help do that? Yeah, reach out and build relationships. So I have no ego, and I think that seems to work well in regards of I just want to learn from everybody and continue to grow and do what's best for that person. So let's do that.
100%. You also touched at the beginning that you value that relationship with the whole staffing team, whether it be in the front office, the more coaching roles. How do you go about building that relationship and making sure that everyone is aware on like where you are, where the athletes are in terms of the high performance piece?
Yeah, I think like when you start a new position, you have to identify, and this is where I learned in the first 90 days book, identify the key stakeholders in your position. Like, who am I going to be communicating and sharing information with? And I help a lot with like the performance science piece and strength conditioning here in my current role. So just making sure I'm including like the right people on the, let's say, workload reports for Hawkeye, and just trying to create reports and structures and systems that everyone feels included, and we can all work together to make the best decision for the team, for the athlete, and just what can we continue to do better. So I think, yeah, identifying early in your position who are the key stakeholders that are going to help support your area, whether it is strength conditioning, performance science, nutrition, you're an athletic trainer, just being consistent with your work. Like if people expect me to send the workload report once a week, like on every Monday, let's say, for whatever team you're working with, like make sure you do that the whole entire season, because you'll see a lot of the time, like people will do it for like the first 2 months of season, and then it's like, here's the report. So I think the best thing you can do is consistency builds trust, and make sure that you're like continuing to harness your craft and learn and stay up to date with research. Because my biggest jump when I went from college to pro sports is just the type of questions that your athletes are asking you. College athletes that are from, let's say, 17 to 21 versus professional athletes that may be 21 to 35, they're just cognitively in a way different state. And they have the money and the resources to get their hands on a lot of things. So it needs to be your job as that like performance group to stay up to date with the research. If they're coming in asking you questions about different things, that you have some type of background and answer and foundation, and you're there to help. So that's been a really cool and new challenge of just the questions that I'm getting asked, like making sure I'm staying curious all the time and reading and staying up to date has been really exciting and a new challenge for me.
I love that. I've also figured out the amazing power of the Journal of Strength and Conditioning books, like the actual magazines. They're so sick.
That's awesome. I love that.
Actually, there was this paper, I forgot the name, but it's on about the cross transfer between exercises. So like, I think they measured an RDL, and they did a Nordic, but they said like any knee dominant movement would work. But it was like, I need to find this article. Like from what I took from it, and it's quite genius. Obviously, injuries can happen anywhere. Let's say it's like someone's torn an ACL or did something knee related that they can't bend that knee. There's actually a very good crossover. Like when you think about it, obviously, if you do a hip hinge instead of like knee dominant, like there is still transfer that goes across the whole muscle. So like if someone's hurt their knee, to keep that hamstring strong, you can still do like good morning type movements, like little RDLs with straight legs, something to just keep that strength up through that leg. So I found that paper fascinating.
Yeah, no, you have to send it to me. That's really interesting and creative, like I said.
Yeah,
like finding solutions is half the battle for us.
Which is something that you've mentioned, and it's having that plan A to C. Can you break down like what the differences would be from plan A to plan C?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I started my journey with microdosing strength training in season, is working with different players. Like maybe plan A is for our schedule per se, like 4 days, maybe you're doing upper, lower with that dynamic and strength focus for each, and then that mobility day. But maybe another athlete like prefers to do 4 total body days, and maybe it's just like 3 to 5 movements. Or maybe another guy likes like 2 total body days, a little bit longer, like maybe for sure 5 or 6 movements, and then 2 mobility days. So I think for me, like I'm doing a lot of communicating directly with the athlete because these guys are all adults, but just not having a one size fits all approach. Don't be a one trick pony is what I've always been told coming up in the field. Like be able to kind of cast a wider net and learn more about strength conditioning and performance science is what I've tried to do personally, to bring value to the team and continue to dabble. And now I'm enjoying looking into other things as well, like recovery. I don't have it figured out by any means. I'm trying to talk with like the Andy Galpins of the world and listen to Huberman Lab a good bit. But yeah, I think looking into a lot of different things. But those are just a few different options.
Yeah, and I think the recovery piece has become so popularized right now that it's a good thing. But it's like, what information is good information to give your athletes? And I think that's where it becomes a little bit trickier because people will respond differently to different recovery modalities. Like, I love ice baths. I know not everyone is wanting to go into an ice bath. It's like, what is your strategies from that on?
Yeah. No, it was funny. I've been talking with a lot of smarter people than myself about this, but they always go back to the first things they bring up. Well, or they're like, all right, well, before you're like doing cryo or getting in a hyperbaric chamber or red light therapy, like how's your nutrition, how's your hydration, and how's your sleep? Like those are going to be the foundation, and everything else is going to be supplemental to that. So I think it always goes back to asking yourself, what does that look like from a recovery standpoint, and how can you build on top of that with some of those other modalities that's only going to make you that much more elite.
I think I found it. The research paper that is.
I like
But
it.
I will send it to you. I will send it to you.
Yes, please do.
So it's going through like the difference in strength crossovers. It's fast. I'll send it to you. But yeah, back to what you were saying, it does become harder to find that piece on like what is specific for the athlete and when.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think Robin Thorpe, I'll send you it too. Like he's put out some good periodization articles for different frameworks of. Clearly, I'd like to do the microdosing piece, but he's done it more for recovery modalities, which I thought was really, really cool. So I'll definitely, Robin Thorpe. I think there might be a part 2 coming out of it as well, so keep your head on a swivel.
Nice. With the traveling piece that you do, how does that then impact the recovery of, again, game recovery and then session recovery from it?
Yeah, they actually look at for like the baseball schedule at the beginning of the year. They'll look at who has like the least stressful schedule, and depends on the division that you're in, and who has like the most stressful schedule from a travel standpoint. But like for us, we had to switch 20 plus time zone changes. Sometimes we get in at like 2 or 3 a.m., which will probably equal poor sleep because you're not waking up and going to bed at the same time when you're getting in at all these crazy times. You may have like dehydration from flights, of course, if you're like getting done with the game and then getting directly on the flight, and cabin pressure and swelling. The culture of professional baseball is still a little bit old school, so there's some alcohol floating around. So how do you factor that in with dehydration as well? These guys are adults. I think sometimes at night when we finish a game, we also factor in, like sometimes it's hard to wind down. Like if it's like a really intense game and you're a bullpen guy and you're coming out in the 8th or 9th inning and you're probably taking a little bit of caffeine of some sort, then you're trying to wind down after that game. It might take a little while. And then maybe you're looking at film post-game because we can turn around and play that team again. So then you have like the blue light from the screen. So I think those are just a few different things from like a baseball travel stress index piece that we're up against. But I mean, so is everybody else. But we do look at, we travel really well, and most teams do, but those are just some of the things that we have to look at as we prepare. We kind of undulate our training cycles depending on travel as well, because there can be periods of time where we have 17 games in a row without an off day, 13 games in a row, 10 games in a row. So we kind of like map things out. Again, we look at like the end of the season and then go backwards and how we want to set up training cycles. If we have like, sometimes we'll have 3 city road trips where we went from like Boston to Miami to New York City without an off day. So yeah, our schedule's pretty beastly.
Nice. What's some low-hanging fruit advice that you give athletes at that point?
For our guys, for like the 3 city road trips, I mean, the one thing, like as I've gone from working in college sports where like college athletes just don't know what they don't know. So they're like, you're constantly trying to like give them a plan ahead. For our pro guys, like if they're an older guy, they've been through the season, they know what it entails. You just want to make sure on the plane, like, do we have the right nutritional pieces to make sure they're going to be efficient? And our dietitian crushes the game. So whether it's having like the Cherry Bundy sleep juice, like if we're getting on the plane right after a game or we're flying to another city. But I think that's where the nutrition piece comes into play a lot, and just kind of controlling that and seeing what you can supplement. And there's a lot of different pieces that you can look into for sleep. But I know like magnesium and things like that as well. But I am not a dietitian, so I'm just kind of, I think from a travel standpoint, just kind of tapping into your dietitian of what you can do and what you can control. And then Chimera, I've used their stuff a lot. The tops, the tights, the red light kind of sewn into the pants. So yeah, that's been kind of helpful.
Yeah, nice. Was a piece of advice that you would give new coaches or coaches wanting to come into this industry?
To pro, college, or both?
Just a new coach.
To all. I would say just understand why you're here. You know, like we're here to help the athlete. It's like not about me, you know, it's about how can I bring value to the team. And to bring value to the team, you have to have a relentless pursuit for knowledge. You know, like you have to always be learning, always staying up to date with research, to your point with the article. Consistently stay on that pursuit. And that's where I kind of go back to the Atomic Habits book of 1% better every day. It stacks up. So I think pour into yourself, you know, invest in yourself. Like there's so many courses, so much free information, like clearly Manny the podcast, but yeah, be on that relentless pursuit for knowledge, whether you're like my grind and how I went about things year one when it comes to like trying to learn and grow should be the same as where I'm at now. You know, it just doesn't stop because again, high performance is evolving so over time.
This is a funny point that I often try to tell people. Is like I think by this episode, the time it comes out, I'll be like on 115, 120 episodes.
Wow,
so it's like, thank you. But it's like, I think the more I go through it, like the less I feel like I know, if that makes sense. Like it's just constant like information and like different types of ways of doing it. But like, again, shout out to Coach Mock. He's so honest, but he has his best intentions for you all the time. And that's how you kind of need to take it. Because he said to me, you're never going to be a specialist at one thing, but you've spoken to so many people, learned so many things that you can be in any conversation and you can hang with them. And I was like, that is true. Like, I have spoken to so many different aspects of this industry that I know for sure about everything. I just don't have that special, like, this is my topic kind of deal.
Yeah. No, I think I've been a chameleon a little bit of when I went from being like an assistant to a director, and now back to an assistant. Like just my mentality's had to shift from like when you're a director, you do have to be a little more of like a generalist and know a little bit about everything and just be dangerous in all the different areas and be able to hold a conversation, like you said, have a seat at the table. So when you go back to an assistant, it's like, all right, what skill set specifically can I bring to the table to help support the director at that point? So I think it's been really unique, and I've really enjoyed kind of my journey of kind of floating from director to assistant back and forth. So it's been really cool and enlightening.
And I think it's also important to know, like, it's not a back step, it's just a side step to whatever you want to do next. And it's like, I know we're kind of similar in a way that we're always trying to push the boundaries to what we can do as professionals. So like, I know you'll have your eyes on something else next, but it's like it's always that continuous growth. It's that 1% getting better every time.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it was interesting. Someone was asking me for advice about like how I've made moves throughout my career, and I was like, to be honest, I've just always stayed very present, like where I'm at, and I've always tried to like help the team win, do everything I can to the athletes that I'm working with at that time, like pour into them, pour into my staff. And usually when you're just doing everything you can at your current spot to take care of people, staff and athletes, like things will take care of themselves and opportunities will open up. You won't have to like sit on Indeed every day and just be like applying to jobs or be on LinkedIn. I think I've been super lucky and I'm very grateful that a lot of the opportunities, like people have called me and been like, are you interested in this? Like a Coach Mac, for example, like, hey, are you interested in this job? I'm going to put you in the hat. So just, like leave long lasting impressions in a positive way on a lot of people, and things kind of tend to take care of themselves.
100%. I fully agree with that. And it was something that we were speaking about at the beginning of the podcast, that just like, it's usually when you're least expecting it, they'll come to you.
Definitely. 100%. That I couldn't agree more with that. So that's why what you do on a daily basis like really, really matters, because you're preparing without even knowing you're preparing for your next move. So that's why you just need to do everything you can to like capitalize on where you're at.
Appreciate you so much for coming on again, Steph. If you let people know where they can find you and sort of reach out to you as well.
Yes. So my Instagram is at Coach Steph Grubbs. So that's easy to find me. Boom, there it is, thriving. If you direct message me on there, like I'll get back to you within 48 hours, I promise. I really try to stay locked in and focused and respond. And then I think my Twitter is still at Coach Steph Mock. Name change stuff, getting married is always crazy and wonky. And then email mockestephanie@gmail.com. Pretty easy. So yeah, one of the 3 ways you can get a hold of me. But Manny, man, part 2, bigger and badder and better. Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I know our time differences are kind of crazy, but just roll by. Here we go.
To be fair, when I signed up for this podcast role, like I kind of knew that S&C is major in the US, so I was kind of already prepared to be like, hey, I'm probably going to have some late nights sometimes. But to me, it's fun because it's like I'm constantly learning, and that to me is fun. Like if we take like hours of PhD compared to hours of podcasting, I'm pretty sure I'm there.
Yes, definitely. Love it, Manny. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.